The hall glittered with chandeliers and laughter, plates clinking like a careful chorus, and Amina sat beside Jallo with a calm she had practiced 1,000 times. He held her hand for comfort, but his father, Musa Kanda, ruled the room with a slow, cold smile. When Musa leaned across the table and spat the words, "street trash," it sounded too loud in that polished space. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-bite. A guest lifted a phone, recording without thinking, and the clip slipped into the small electric world outside the room before anyone could breathe. For a breathless minute Amina felt every eye like a tiny weight on her chest, the insult landing harder because it was public, because the crowd was chosen to admire people like him, and because Jallo did not stand up. Her cheeks burned, but she did not scream. She made a quiet choice to leave with her dignity intact, to step away from clinking crystal and whispered pity. As she walked out, the video was already spreading, a bright, ugly bloom on feeds and group chats. Comments poured in, some cruel, some shocked, some ugly jokes. But among the noise a few messages said, "You do not deserve this, and are you okay?" The rawness of the moment made the clip viral and Amina's silence echo. In that instant she was humiliated and seen at once, a private wrong made public, and the world had a clear image of Musa's cruelty to contrast with the quiet self-control of the woman he thought he could shame. When the night's bright lights and glass fell away, Amina's mind drifted back to Nuru, to the narrow lanes where she grew up between fruit stalls and hunched shopkeepers, the air always smelling of spice and dust. She remembered running errands for her mother, the long afternoons folding cloth, the small proud moments when she counted money for a vendor and helped him balance his day. Those streets taught her to listen, to see what others missed, and to work without complaint. She learned the value of patience from waiting in long lines and the value of courage from standing up to bullies twice her size. School came hard at first because the family needed every coin, but Amina kept reading at night, borrowing books under the dim light of a kerosene lamp, and she never let go of a stubborn belief that knowledge could move her and the people she loved. Years later, quietly, she left Nuru for a world that looked nothing like the market, grey towers, bright computer screens, and schedules measured by minutes. She studied finance, worked late into the night, took jobs others dismissed, and built a track record so careful no one could doubt it. She rose through banks and firms until she sat at meetings where decisions about millions were made, and eventually she earned a seat on the board of a global trustee firm, a place that trusted her with other people's savings and futures. She kept that life like a small secret in her pocket when she returned to Jallo's family affairs, knowing Musa Kanda would never picture a woman from Nuru signing off on international trust agreements. Her strength did not come from loud words or flashy titles, it came from the years of steady work, from being both patient and precise, and from carrying a quiet confidence that was harder to shake than any insult. That contrast, the dirt and spice of Nuru and the cool, exact world of global finance, lived inside her, a private power that made the words "street trash" land on empty air. Amina walked back to her small apartment with the same calm she showed at the banquet, but inside everything was moving fast. The house where Jallo lived buzzed with anger and gossip, and she could feel the heat of it even after she shut her door. She sat at her little table, put the video out of her head, and breathed in and out until her hands stopped shaking. Then she did the thing she always did when things got real. She opened a locked folder on her laptop and started writing names and plans like a quiet map. First she called her old mentor at the National Financial Authority, the man who had taught her how to read a bad balance sheet and who still answered when she rang. He listened without surprise and promised a careful look, not on emotion but on facts. Next she texted the investigative reporter at Kijani Press, a woman known for turning small tips into big stories. Amina knew how to frame a lead and how to protect a source, and she trusted this reporter to make noise only when it helped the people hurt by Musa's deals. Finally she messaged her cousin at Atlas Capital, the one who held a key escrow account that could stop a transfer in its tracks if the paperwork was clean. She arranged a time, shared encrypted files, and set rules: freeze only with proof, act fast but lawfully, and protect the vendors who would suffer if the empire tumbled without a plan. No grand speeches, no revenge plans, just clear steps and people she chose because they were smart, brave, and loyal in the quiet way she was. As dawn crept up, her little team clicked into place, not to humiliate, but to make sure a crooked house of cards could not crush the small shops and workers who had fed so many of them for years. Amina set to work like someone peeling an onion, slow and careful so every layer could be checked and none of it would sting later. She opened bank records, matched timestamps with shipping receipts, and followed money through a maze of little companies that lived on paper and post office boxes. Those offshore shell companies were thin on real activity but thick on distraction, each one set up to hide a payment or move a debt. She found invoices from small vendors that were marked paid on Kanda Holdings records but had never reached the shopkeepers who depended on them. She spotted unpaid taxes that should have been reported, tiny gaps that together made a loud signal. The real shock came when she compared loan documents to the collateral listed at the bank. Machines, warehouses, even land had been promised as security twice over in different places, as if the same thing could back two big loans at once. That mismatch meant the bank had been lending on paper value that did not exist in practice. Amina pulled contracts, emails, and a trail of transfers into neat folders, and when one file closed another opened until a clear picture appeared. The picture showed not a polished family empire but a stack of shaky deals propped up by tricks and secrecy. She cross-checked every claim with her mentor at the National Financial Authority and had the reporter from Kijani Press read the plain facts for public sense. Her cousin at Atlas Capital confirmed the escrow keys and verified which accounts could be frozen without breaking the law. What had seemed like a private insult now had names, numbers, and dates behind it. The evidence was careful, legal, and precise. It did not shout. It simply removed the safety net under Musa Kanda's empire and left the riches hanging in the thin air of truth. At dawn, with the city still half asleep, Amina sat at her small table and opened the folders she had built through the night. The files were clean and exact, each number checked twice, each transfer traced to an account or a shell company. She did not call to shout or to shame. She called because she had a duty to the people who would be ruined if the truth stayed hidden. Her first call was to her cousin at Atlas Capital. She spoke calmly, read out account numbers and dates, and told him what would happen if those lines of credit stayed open while the same collateral was already promised elsewhere. He paused, then asked for protocols. She gave them, offered encrypted copies of the contracts, and said plainly, "Freeze nothing without legal cover, but be ready to act the moment regulators signed." Then she rang her old mentor at the National Financial Authority. She explained the shell companies, the unpaid vendor taxes, the double-marked collateral, and she sent him the spreadsheets that made a clean case. She put no words between the facts. She framed the choice simply and without drama: pause the flows now and protect hundreds of small suppliers, or do nothing and watch Musa's liquidity collapse in a rush that would wipe out those who had the least. The tone of her voice made the stakes clear. This was not about revenge. This was about preventing a greater harm using the tools that could stop it. By the time the sun touched the city, both men had the evidence and the legal paths to move. Amina felt a quiet relief, not joy. She had done what she could with what she knew. She left the rest to law and process, knowing the right call could save lives and that power used with care was far stronger than power used for noise. By mid-morning the city felt different, as if someone had flipped a switch and the calm was gone. Kanda Holdings accounts showed frozen flags and the bank told partners to stop transfers. Investors who had spoken with friendly smiles the night before suddenly pulled back their calls and their emails. Contractors who had not been paid for months lined up at bank branches and at supplier doors demanding money and answers. Someone in the crowd posted the earlier banquet clip again, this time with screenshots of the papers Amina had sent, and the two things together made a hard picture everyone could understand. Musa's phone would not stop buzzing. Margin calls, urgent messages from lenders, and lawyers asking for explanations filled his screen. He moved through the halls of his offices like a man surprised to find the floor giving way. Security guards and aides whispered and shuffled papers, and the confident voice he used in meetings came out small. The glow of the chandeliers at the banquet seemed to dim as the feeds carried his troubles back to the same rooms where people had once toasted him. Journalists set up live cameras outside Kanda Towers and at the small shops in Nauru that had finally seen justice in motion. Social feeds were loud with reactions: shock, pleasure, worry for the workers, and angry questions for those who had enabled the loans. Jallow watched his father's world unravel and felt its edges crack under his feet. He could not fix everything with words. The bailout offers that should have arrived did not. Lines of credit were paused until audits could prove the assets were real. In less than a morning a polished empire showed seams and empty promises. For many it was sudden, for some it was a long time coming. A house of cards did not need a strong wind to fall, it only needed the right hand to take away one careful card. The old dinner clip came back into view like a match struck in the dark, and this time it hit together with the financial files, so people could not look away. The video of Musa calling Amina street trash ran again and again, and next to it were screenshots of invoices, bank notices, and the clear spreadsheets Amina had passed to the press and the regulator. Social feeds filled with the same shocked faces, with short videos that stitched the insult and the proof into a single story everyone could understand. Hashtags trended. People who had never spoken up before shared memories of unpaid work and broken contracts, and the small vendors in Nauru were filmed telling their stories in calm, steady voices that made the public listen. Musa's public apologies played on the same channels, but they sounded empty beside the documents and the voices of the hurt. The words did not match the numbers and the law soon moved in. The regulator opened a formal probe, investigators asked for records, and banks put holds where lies had once been hidden. Jallow stood between his father and the growing storm and found he could not hold both. His silence at the table turned into questions and then into distance, and his loyalty changed shape under the weight of truth. Reporters followed Amina differently now, not as a gossip but as the quiet person who had used skill to stop a greater harm, and she became a symbol people shared in the same breath as the vendors she helped. Some called it revenge, others called it justice, but most called it a lesson in power used well. A modest woman from a market who answered cruelty with careful facts and with action aimed at protection, not punishment. The country watched as a private insult became a public reckoning, and many found a strange relief in seeing the proud brought down by things they had thought could not be touched: numbers, law, and the steady courage of someone who refused to be invisible. Amina did not let the noise change who she was. In the weeks after the probe she turned attention from spectacle to repair, working quietly so the people who had been hurt would come first. She met with lawyers, accountants, and the small shop owners who had waited too long for payments. Together they set up a legal trust to hold the recovered funds and to pay unpaid invoices in a fair order. Meetings were patient and clear. She listened to each vendor, learned which debts were most urgent, and made sure the trust paid wages and restocked shelves before anything else. Offers came fast. Television programs wanted interviews. Wealthy groups wanted her name on charity events. Some fund managers proposed deals that would turn the story into profit. She said no to most of it. She refused anything that would use the vendors for headlines or strip them of their dignity. Instead she taught simple skills: how to keep clear records, how to open a basic account, how to write a short invoice that could be filed and proved. She made sure the trust had rules so it helped people without taking control of their shops. Amina asked for one small gathering in Nauru, where she learned to count coins, and there she stood with tea and bread among the people who raised her. No banners, no speeches written by others, just quiet thanks and practical promises. Reporters were there but she asked them to focus on the vendors and their work. Photos spread not as a trophy but as an instruction: this is how to protect each other. In time some shops reopened, young helpers learned bookkeeping, and the market breathed easier. Amina went back to her work in finance, still modest, still exact. The city remembered that a single careful call, made for the right reasons, could do more good than 1,000 angry posts. She taught that dignity and skill, calmly used, can change what seems unchangeable.